Gears of War E-Day is shaping up to be an excellent Gears of War game and a good release. Weekend 2 of the beta just finished up, and I'm walking away with mostly positive impressions and really looking forward to getting my hands on the full release and playing a lot more. It's always a positive when you walk away from a gaming experience itching to play more and looking forward to future drops. So that's the overall takeaway from the beta weekend. As things changed from weekend 1 to weekend 2, we had some minor tweaks to weapon balancing, like a Lancer buff that I'd like to talk about. But first and foremost, core mechanics of versus Gears of War E-Day feel good. It feels like a logical next step for Gears of War, and the Coalition was in a very difficult spot here trying to put together a Gears game that did feel unapologetically Gears of War, but was also more accessible for people, this being a rewind back in time for a prequel entry, and especially with how Gears of War 5 played out, not being very good or popular, and then a 7-year gap between releases. So there's a lot riding on Gears of War E-Day. Can the Coalition make a more approachable Gears for new players and people that may have lapsed with the series? And can they also make the game feel like Gears of War with an appreciable skill gap that veterans have come to love over the last 20 years? I think they've done a really good job of this and are mostly sticking the landing. So movement has slowed down. There's definitely a difference between the hyper bouncing, more floaty, cartoony feel that we're used to of, let's say, Gears 3 through 5. And this is a bit more return to the weighty movement system that is a bit slower, but also feels heavier. I really like it. I think it's different with the inclusion of the sprint mechanic away from the roadie run and the slowed down, heavier wall bouncing. But there's a lot of the movement here that will be more understandable to new players, while also giving that deep movement skill gap for people that are familiar with the series. So I think the movement is in a good spot. There are some things that are definitely worth criticizing, like responsiveness and camera movement. I'm mainly playing on mouse and keyboard, so I don't think I felt those effects of the slower movement people complain about as much as controller. But when I did plug a controller in just to test around, it did feel a little, I don't want to say unresponsive, but a little slower to respond to your camera turning. Whether that be just because of the analog input, we need to scale some of the aim acceleration, I don't know, but I do know mouse and keyboard felt really good, and remapping the buttons to what I wanted to separate sprint, cover, mantle, slide, all worked out great. I think it felt really good on mouse and keyboard. So movement is in a good spot, I think. I really enjoyed the verticality and the extra layer of mind games that jumping over obstacles gave to the Nasher fights instead of just the old, go around cover, pop shotting, blind firing, back A-ing, up A-ing people. It was really cool to be able to hop over cover. And as time goes on, this will be more expected, but there's definitely an extra layer of combat there. So I think the movement options are in a good place, and it'll be interesting to see feedback on full release for that. But let's talk weapon balance now. The Nasher has always been the thing to dominate Gears of War. I looked at it as like your utility weapon, your combat evolved pistol or battle rifle, if you will, with the Lancer being more of a support role. I thought in weekend 1 the Lancer was in a good place to fulfill that and also do a good job at countering shotgun rushers and Nasher play if you played it correctly and used angles and help from teammates. They buffed it, and the buff was definitely noticeable in week 2. I primarily played ranked all week, and seeing ranked in my A-tier skill division definitely became more of a crossing chess match rather than everyone meets in the zone and has Nasher fights, which is good. I don't think that's a bad evolution of Gears and a good way to integrate rifle play into the experience. This is a third-person cover shooter, whether we want to admit it or not, and having everyone just pile up on an objective with Nasher fights is definitely fun, but I can definitely understand and see the vision of the health of the game being more balanced around both. The Lancer buff didn't change the gameplay to the point where Nasher fights were completely, invalidated, and it felt like a nice push and pull tug-of-war experience of moving through cover on the map, providing Lancer fire to get close enough to objectives to then engage in those Nasher fights. Kind of gives more options for play and makes the game deeper, in my opinion. The only experience I really had that was people being upset about this were a few people in rank that refused to use anything but the Nasher, and we're just W keying toward the objective, typing some expletives in chat against rifle users. So I think the idea for the rifle play is good to give us that push and pull of using the map awareness, map knowledge, and positioning to advance on objectives, and then things become Nasher fights, right? It makes using cover and how you use it in the context of the movement options well thought out and thoughtful rather than just rushing. So the one feedback of rifle play I think could use a change is if we're going to have more lethality to the rifles, I'd like to see the stopping power reduced somewhat, because that does limit a little bit more of your cover traversal as you advance to an objective, and kind of just becomes, okay, if I have a smoke grenade, I can smoke it out and sort of rush in, but without the smoke after you use it, it becomes a little more grindy and things come to a gridlock. So I think weapon balance in terms of rifle and shotgun play is almost there. I don't think this would be a bad weapon tuning to release with. And I don't think the Coalition wants to go down the path of making the Lancer more accurate at distance. One, for lore reasons, right? This is a prototype Lancer in 8A, but also making it more accurate further away would increase that sense of gridlock and map stillness in terms of movement and advancing toward objectives. So I like the place that the rifles are in, serving more as like a close to close mid-range option. And the power weapons that we've seen so far do an excellent job at breaking holds and map positioning at long range. The long shot is the best it's ever been in the series, in my opinion. The gut puncher is a really nice, skillful option to be able to kill people around cover instead of having to rotate around the map. So I think the power weapons are in a good spot to break setups rather than having to rely on, pure rifle strength to outshoot someone there. So I'm interested to see what other weapons like the breach shot can add to it, but I like the balance we have so far of the Nasher utility weapon, the Lancers and the Retro Lancers, and the snub pistol being used for more support and counter options. And I think the movement plays into it really well. There's still those classic Nasher strafe wall bounce fights we like, and the rifles just kind of add an extra layer of combat to it, which I think is good for not only the ranked scene, but also casual players. Last topic, ranked. Definitely spent the majority of my time there, and I'd like to see a little more transparency on launch with the division tiers and the visible medal rank system. Being put in Division A, which is essentially showing your hidden MMR than other games, but then also having the medal rank that you progress through feels weird to me, just because if the division of your skill is really what it controls your matchmaking opponents and teammates, then you could be in Gold Division A and be playing the exact same people that are in Onyx Division A. So it makes the medal rank and the progression there feel a little hollow, when really what you're worried about is the skill division or the MMR rating. And if we only have A, B, C, D of those, it's only 4 categories to progress through without seeing any meaningful change over time. So maybe have some extra layers to that, like an A+, an A, an A-, and so forth, to give you a little bit more sense of where you stand in those divisional ranks. Also hope to see some sort of matchmaking parameters for solos, duos, and full teams. It's definitely more challenging playing a full team, just with the rifle strength and coordination versus having solo and duo queues, and I solo queued primarily. So all in all, I think this was a very good beta, and it was just an appetizer for the full release. I'm looking forward to October, and we're definitely going to be playing a lot of ranked.